So hello, everyone. A pleasure to see your faces or half the faces that are in the room, which is all good. Wanted to do quick introductions. My name is Sabine Justilien. I am the product manager at IBM, specifically around Call for Code for Racial Justice. And I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Wyatt, who's over here in the corner, who's also going to be sharing with you all a little bit later in this deck. So Today, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about lessons learned as we're exploring racial equity and technology through Call for Code for Racial Justice. And then in the greater Call for Code ecosystem, how you are able to access opportunities to get engaged and get involved within bringing code to community through your own individual contributions. So in 2020, we actually launched Call for Code for Racial Justice as a response to the needs that we're seeing within having a diversity of thought and contributors to the open source space. So really harking on the idea that diversity of perspective, expertise, innovation is really transformative within communities of color, but you also need to be able to have representation there. And so 2020, we really launched Call for Code for Racial Justice as an exemplar for diverse communities to become engaged with an open source technology and in our solutions specifically. So looking at 2021, it's like, how can we actually exponentially bring this code that lives in GitHub that is typically inaccessible to communities and communities of color to the places where they're beginning to interact? How can we make sure that it's accessible to them? And we knew that we had to create technology with community, so that being really the focal point, test it with community, and make sure that we can deploy it in the communities that actually have the highest need. And so later on in this presentation, I'm going to talk about how we did just that in the city of Los Angeles with an amazing partner. And the clock started yesterday. When we talk about racial equity, we know that the conversation is happening at the corporate level, even in the technology space, that people are talking about it. We're holding companies accountable, and we need to start having this conversation in a realistic way. We've seen articles about it. We've seen conferences. We've seen, searches and studies around how can we create technology that is accessible to everyone who wants to be involved. Only 24% of computing jobs are with women, and 70% of the coding community is traditionally not people of color. So with the help of technology, coders can help to build the diversity and equality in their professions and uplift those underrepresented communities in those spaces. So the time is really now, and which is where we're really going to dive a little bit deeper into how we can really diversify the coders and even contributors, which is another word I really like to use in the case of Call for Code for Racial Justice, to push technology to new heights. And when we even try and take a look at what is it costing us, not even around the mental health or emotional health for racial inequity, we're looking at $16 trillion because those are lost opportunities for funding within entrepreneurs who are trying to build up any type of products or services to enhance specific problem spaces they want to address. We see discriminatory lending. We see inaccess to education and other opportunities for you to build up almost like community wealth, especially within Black communities. So we know that the cost is exponential, and we have to really start looking at ways for us to address that. So Call for Code for Racial Justice was an initiative that kicked off in June of 2020. It was launched by IBM in relationship with Red Hat to really focus on the emotions, the frustration that many of our colleagues were feeling around racial justice and racial intolerance that were happening in the country, specifically, again, in the response to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, many others who have had this system of inequity applied to their lives, and they really haven't been able to have agency anymore because they are no longer with us. And so the mission of Call for Code for Racial Justice is really to look at how technology, specifically in the three pillars that we built around policy and legislation, police and judicial reform, and diverse representation, can start to address some of the ways in which community members at a more local and regional level can use technology to help themselves. But even from the developer community, how can we start to showcase diversity in thought and encouraging education around these problem areas, just so that their skill set is not just on the technology, but really around the social science and the social impact that they can have through their contributions. And what I also really like to think is really unique about Call for Code for Racial Justice is that we are building with community in mind, with community. And we do that through a couple of different ways. So using a racial equity lens, we look at how technology, especially when we're talking about AI and machine learning, which we know typically, are built with bias. How can we start to transform that using a racial equity lens that, is looking at what those data sources are, how we're making sure that if it's feeding into our technology, that it's not having unintended consequences. How do we create a workflow where we can assess social and racial inequities and drive for more equitable outcomes and how our solutions are going to be deployed? How can we make sure that these configurations and accessibility are able to operationalize, what racial justice can look like in the technology space? And then how can we envision greater impact when it comes to implementation for these solutions? And I think that all goes to not just relying on the technology community as it's built right now, but that intersection of what does social sciences say about it when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about policing and judicial reform, when we're talking about people who normally are not in those conversations. When you say my end user is going to be, the layperson, how do we ensure that the people who are influencing us at a structural level, so police, lawyers, policymakers, understand that technology has a role to play, and we can't really execute that well without their input. So having this diversity of perspective really allowed us to start to use that process map that I just shared with you on how we were able to get YMCA of Los Angeles involved within one of our specific solutions, Fivefish Voter. And again, if you can see by the name, it is around voting. So Fivefish Voter is a solution we'll dive a little bit into moving forward, but we also want to highlight that 2020, the election there had the highest voter turnout in the 21st century. So it showed that we had, 62% Black, 59% Asian, and 53% Hispanic voters, exercising their right to vote based on the US Census. And that if we're even looking at the kind of cultural breakdowns or language accessibility, where they're living, how they're learning about voter resources, there's not a lot of information that's out there. So Fivefish Voter really does want to focus on being a catalyst for these diverse communities to understand what's available to them when it comes to their voter rights. So Fivefish Voter is really around how voting is usually impossible or extremely challenging due to the burdensome local processes, changing requirements and regulations, and lack of information when it comes to registering to vote. If you've moved, how do you make sure you can transfer your voting rights? If you need to have additional resources around like childcare, or you're a felon who doesn't know what happens next after you've been released, and how does that really play within your ability to exercise your right to vote? That doesn't currently have a really traditional or accessible process right now. So Fivefish Voter is really focused on how do we address those key areas around voter suppression when it comes to voter registration, voter ID laws, voter purging, all these other restrictions that typically are affecting people within the margins of society who don't have the same access or ability to get information on keeping up with their civic engagement duties. So right now, Fivefish Voter is a new project. When I say new, it's been in existence for a year, and we know that some legacy products have been in existence for decades. But as a new project, it really is hyper focused on those people who need additional resources. So if we're talking about language accessibility, now the solution is available in over 11 languages. How can we expand access to childcare resources for families who need it when they want to actually go and exercise their right to vote? And then if we're even talking about the evolution of how previously incarcerated individuals can learn about their rights and what they can do to get them reinstated. So the solution for this case is really the foundation where our developers are able to enhance the base, so what Fivefish Voter is right now. But then we also have this component where we're deploying this into communities. So we have adopters like the YMCA of Los Angeles who can enhance this even on their side with the technical resources that they can be provided with. Yes, you can find us on Google. You can Google Call for Code for Racial Justice and get super hyper focused on Call for Code for Racial Justice, specifically Fivefish Voter, and get involved and explore our GitHub as it stands right now to see the activities, not just within the deployment we had with YMCA of LA, but even activities that we're doing right now with Hacktoberfest. So during the month of October, you can have as many contributions as you like, especially around the key issues around language verification, testing, and accessibility that we really want to enhance the solution to expand impact within the communities that we're looking to serve moving forward. So a little bit about the YMCA of LA. It's made up of people from all different backgrounds. They serve over 500,000 individuals in the LA area. And typically, I think some people focus on YMCAs as gyms that you can go and visit. You know, that's like the swimming pool, like the lessons you can get in during the summer. But they actually have activities that range from voter engagement to childcare, to other opportunities for you to educate yourself around different activities going on in the community. So with that lens, we really looked at the YMCA as representing a diversity of thought and people in a community that has, both, the wealthiest of wealthies and then, those who don't have as much. And so with that understanding, how could we bring this technical solution into the ways that they are currently specifically engaging their civic duties? So right now, the YMCA of Los Angeles is also a voting site. They have great relationships with the state of California in order to, have practice policy with their youth in government program. And so we really use them as a use case and a pilot right now on being able to dive deep into what are the community problems that they're experiencing. So throughout the, I think, past like 5-6 months, we've been working with their staff and youth in government program to capture those experiences and opportunities for voter empowerment. So right now, their youth in government program is like an integral part to the YMCA movement and provides services to, I think, over 26 different locations in the LA area, especially around youth engagement. They have close to 5,000 high school and middle school youth from across the state every year, emphasizing civic engagement. So the solution Fivefish Voter is going to be able to have implications on how this program is going to be able to shape future leaders in that voter engagement space, but then also bridge the gap between, older adults, people who don't, speak English as a first language, or just lack the know-how on how to register to vote, and being able to use the youth as a way to pioneer this work. So being able to dive deep, we had listening sessions, we had workshops where we sat down and did this wonderful mural board, which I think is a non-paid ad right now for mural, and ways for us to collaborate and get that feedback on what are some of their pain points, where do they see solution like Fivefish Voter fixing or solving for, but then how can they also, iterate on something that can be enhanced within the solution itself. And so for that, we were able to expand resources for non-English speakers. And like I said, 11 languages that are available right now, expanded childcare resources across the 50 states. So if you are going to look to exercise your right to vote, you can tap into the YMCA, which provides childcare and being able to find your location efficiently via the web application. Also having a portion for youth advocacy, those who want to early register or pre-register to vote, and then even more specific resources for LA voters who want to, again, understand how they can vote in these upcoming elections November 2nd. And so if you're from LA, hopefully you know that's coming up and you can use Fivefish Voter to understand more. And we're also really looking to uplift how the YMCA and the youth who are participating in this pilot can share their stories. So we are happy to announce that in the South by Southwest conference in March, we actually have one of the youth who is the president of the Palisades Malibu Youth in Government Program at YMCA speaking about his involvement within this program, within this open source solution. And then also talking about how student developers, how we're really looking to incorporate training them, upskilling them, not just from a technical perspective, but from a policy perspective and how they can contribute to these open source projects moving forward. And I really do want to hark here that they were really intimidated when we're talking about youth specifically about how can I provide value if I'm not a programmer, I have no technical experience. And what's really important about any type of racial equity or social equity you're bringing into community, you have to make it relevant for them on their terms. And so we really just ask them, what are you looking to gain when you're going out to vote? When you're doing these programming, what are the questions that people are asking the most? Where are you seeing the most need? And that in and of itself is able to help us translate that into more technical components that are involved within this open source solution. So we were really active and really focused on meeting them where they are. They're really good at programs and we're really good at programming. So making sure that they knew that they can connect with us using the skills that they already have. All right, so talking a little bit more about Fivefish Voter, our tech stack. So I'm also gonna call out here that I am not a technical person. I like to think of myself as being able to learn from great colleagues. And we actually have one of the developers here in the room, Gerald Mitchell, who helped to build out Fivefish Voter from, when we actually started this project in June of last year to right now, and he's helping to maintain this. So it's used, building Vue.js, Node, and then the Carbon design system. All of these things are again open source, and other different types of technology that you can actually understand where we're pulling information from, how we're trying to make sure that we're able to have maintainers, especially on the front end and back end side, where as we're growing out the project, as we're looking at new ways to grow, you all have a way to do that. That's on the technical front. We also even have testers. If you want to be able to test the solution, get your hands on it, be able to deploy it locally, we would love to have you involved in the project. As well as project managers. If you just want to have experience running Scrum meetings, if you want to understand, how do we go through software development life cycles, there are opportunities for you to learn, grow, and do with us. And we still need you. Even if you have an opinion that you want to share, there are opportunities for you to do that within Fivefish Voter. So going into our lessons learned, I think I talked about it a little bit already, but we have to be able to question constantly. That's the best case scenario for any type of product or solution or experience you're building, especially with communities that don't know you. You want to be able to have that trust. And so you have to question yourself constantly. Why am I doing this? Who is this for? And am I willing to change based on the information and feedback that I'm getting? So having the youth perspective from the YMCA of Los Angeles, I think is what's missing in a lot of different iterations of products that are built for community. Youth voices are extremely strong. They're the most active, technical users, especially on mobile, that we're seeing right now. So being able to give them a voice within this project has been really important and really unique. We also have to be able to allow contributors to be part of the experience and the story of deployment. So when we're even looking at the contributors we had within our GitHub to get to this deployment and piloting phase within YMCA, we had people we had never met, people we hadn't had conversations with, that were really interested in, I want to build out, what this translator button can look like. How can people, greater, access the website if you are hard of hearing or if you're deaf or visually impaired. Like they were interested in contributing to the solution right now. And that's what the YMCA of LA is being able to use as part of their civic engagement work. And then consider the margins. How do we meet the needs of those who have those technical gaps in order to maintain a project that, again, is racially equitable, that's looking across this process of how am I building, who am I building it for, how are they going to receive it, how are they really going to use it? And even if we're looking at, typically marginalized communities or community-based organizations, they don't have a lot of technical resources. So what also makes Call for Co-for-Racial Justice extremely unique is that we work not just on the open source code and making sure that it can be maintained in this open source space, but deploying that into communities with the technical resources that they would need to, spin up their own instance of it, to pilot it, to understand other connections for funding or for other kind of development resources that they would need to maintain this as their own. We're not just looking at test this great solution for us, and then we'll leave you and see you in 5 months. We're really around sustainability and building this out as a part of our program. And looking at this exponential impact, that there's an opportunity for us to grow all of the solutions. There are 7 that currently exist within Call for Co-for-Racial Justice, not just at the US level. We are also expanding this program to be a global program, especially within other marginalized communities, within Brazil, South Africa, other regions of Latin America, and in the continent of Africa to say that we want to learn again, and that's the stage that we're in, having those listening sessions, having those opportunities to hear from anti-racist organizations, community building organizations, to learn what are the issues that they're facing, and could technology play a part in it without us being prescriptive and saying, this is what we're going to give you. How can we receive what you're saying and incorporating that into technology that exists right now? It's in Call for Code for Racial Justice. Oh, that was a double. Oh, I did it twice. So I want to invite you all, one, to contribute and support YMCA of LA, especially in their deployment of Fivefish Voter. You can join our community right now, and you'll be greeted by the wonderful Demi Ajayi, who is our community manager. We've really been working on getting diversity of thought and experiences within our community to help mentor people who don't have as much experience with the open source contributions. So we have a lot of retirees, we have people who are just getting their feet wet and saying, I want to be able to support you. And you can learn about the projects, you can consume them, you can look at the tutorials and how they were built, get that technical know-how, but then even dive in deeper and contribute to the projects as they stand right now. And even if you just want to chat with us, you really can find me and Demi on our Call for Code Slack, and you can be introduced to Fivefish Voter as well as other projects that exist within that space. So I've shared a lot about Call for Code for Racial Justice specifically because this is really the one-year announcement at All Things Open, but I do want to give you additional context in the broader ecosystem of Call for Code. So Call for Code is a multi-year program that was created by David Clark at David Clark Cause, with IBM being the founding partner. So the technical executor and how people are able to respond to social issues through technology. So we also do this in partnership with the United Nations Human Rights Commission, as well as the Linux Foundation. So Call for Code features one of the largest Tech for Good challenges, where we have an annual challenge where you can submit a project based on the different themes that we have. So we've had climate change, we've had COVID-19, we've had disaster preparedness and recovery. And if your solution is selected, you receive $200,000 to actually build up your solution, launch it into communities, all with the help and support of our partners, especially here at IBM. So we're really focused on having developers create practical, effective, and high quality applications that have real impact in community. And that's something I don't know if I coined it myself, but I'm always saying code to community, like having real impact, not just saying I created something nice and that's it. But at the core, it's really about being able to bridge that gap between how this open source project that you're creating is going to affect the end users who are going to be in the room. And we do that through this framework that really helps to say, this is the challenge that we're posing to you, and then this is the deployment phases that you'd be able to go through once you get that $200,000 prize, to show that we're really, again, about refining the technology, using it in this open source space, and making sure that when we're actually launching this, that it can be sustainable. So you have the access to IBM's ecosystem of partners and clients who are really interested in that social impact space to help you refine the work that you're doing. One of our examples is Pira, who came out of one of the open source challenges, and it's an Internet of Things and AI solution that monitors the levels of toxin exposures to firefighters and alerts them before they are in danger of any type of long-term respiratory problems that they could experience as a result of them combating fires. And we know in this era of climate change, there are more wildfires that are happening, you need more protection. And so this is an actual solution that is being piloted within the city of Catalonia and other kind of expanding opportunities for them to test and iterate on this solution so that it can be expanded to other firefighters across the world to have more impact. And with that, I'm not closing, you will hear from me again, but I want to turn it over to Wyatt to talk about more opportunities for you to get involved with Call for Code, specifically this case competition we have coming up.
I can't believe we got through that many slides in that amount of time. We're actually ahead of time. So a lot of what we talked about with racial injustice starts very early, right? And the inequality starts early. So one of the things that we've done to hopefully help address that and help you guys address that is the Call for Code Education Innovation Case Competition. And this has just started. So you guys are in the ground floor. there's a lot of problems in the world. I don't know if you've looked around, but there's a lot going on. And I would submit to you that a lot of it starts with education, right? So if this is something that we can fix, it's something that can fix a lot of other things in all of our world. And inequality starts very early as well. And that has been impacted further by COVID-19, right? Disadvantaged communities have been more affected by some of this change, particularly because of the digital divide. So one of the things this case competition is hoping to do is to help come up with the technology, help you guys crowdsource that technology to improve the situation. And obviously some communities of color are impacted even more, and particularly with the COVID situation. So we are looking to this group to help come up with those crowdsourced solutions. And the beauty of this is a low code competition, and this is its first year, and there's some substantial prize money. This is for college students, right? So I should have mentioned that up front. So I don't know how many of you people know college students or maybe have one in your family. Could you please tell them about this? And I will say that their chances of winning this prize are far better than the lottery. So as this is the first year, we really want to give this a great start. This is not, you have to design a program. This is, you have to strategize using some APIs to a really innovative solution that can help. So we're in the middle though, although there's still plenty of time to submit. We kicked off September 30th, and we're going from October 1st to November, and then we're going to have a little bit of an award ceremony once we hit the deadline on November 11th, and so we'll announce the winners on December 7th. And Sabine, did I get everything?
I think you did.
All right.
And if you need us to go back to any slides so you can take photos and make sure you capture, you want to go back to that one? There we go.
Yeah, and please, that's the code. You can go to the website, you can share it with all your friends, and we would love to see some submissions coming from All Things Open this year. So thank you. And then I guess we'll take your questions.
Yeah, well, yes, we have 4 more slides. But yeah, so actions you can take, you can look at this really quick, but I think that this slide is also going to be made available so you can understand where you can click and begin to work through getting a part of that competition. So holding that down for folks to look at, and again, answer the call. Like, this is always going to be the conclusion of any call for code presentation, but it's not the conclusion yet, because we always love having more slides. But remember that, you know, the global competition that I had mentioned, we're actually coming to a close right now, and we're having the awards coming up in November. So you'll be able to see the types of submissions and open source projects that were included as part of our global challenge, our university challenge, our regional challenge, PTech and Black Girls Code challenge. So you'll just be able to see the work that we've done in the past year and get involved with, you know, being part of this program in the next year when we deploy it. And we're looking to having you all there. And now we will take any questions. And you can also find us on LinkedIn. If you want to get involved in the program, happy to answer any questions. And you can also go to Gerald, who's right there.
Yeah, or in our booth.
Yes, or in our booth. We're available everywhere.
I'm the marketing guy.